In October of 2025, a Series 2 Land Rover popped up on Marketplace, and I immediately jumped on it. I have always loved the look of the early Series Rovers, particularly the shorter wheelbase versions. However, something about this long wheelbase car spoke to me when I saw it. So 2 days later, come the weekend, I rented a U-Haul out of Victoria, BC, where I live, and made the trip up our island to Oyster River. My father joined me as we drove 250 kilometers to pick up the car and tow it all the way back. The gentleman who sold me the car was incredibly friendly and had an unbelievable car collection himself, along with multiple projects he was restoring. Now, the story behind the car he told me was that it had been pulled out of the woods near a place called Forbidden Plateau, which is close to a ski hill on the island. This is an area which gets a lot of snow, which explains its appearance before he gave it a coat of paint. As you can see from these early photos, the paint made a massive difference in appearance compared to the original state it was in. To say it had seen some moisture would be an understatement. Now, from what he had gathered from the previous owner was that the Rover used to be part of the BC Forest Service and had at one point been taken all the way to Alaska. I assume this was a trip the owner personally took rather than the Forest Service. And when looking at the car, you can see where a fuel tank used to sit in the tub, as well as the plumbing for the tank. Secondly, in place of the traditional storage bin under the driver's seat, a second fuel tank was present. Pretty amazing to think of the journey this car has had. A roughly 6,000 kilometer round trip to the Great North. A story and character that just can't be bought. The car has matching serial numbers on all the parts, and reads 21,904 miles on the dial. But that could be 121,000, 221,000, or 321,000 miles. Who knows? I contacted the Rovers Club out of England with the serial number, and a very generous member checked the records for me. And the records indicate the car was built on the 19th of July, 1960, and was sent to Rover of Vancouver on August 15th. Now, if anyone watching does know more about this configuration and its use with the BC Forest Service, I would be extremely interested to hear. Possible hints are the Koenig winch on the front, as well as a trailer port wired through the back. However, when looking online, I could not find images of the specific style being used in the service. Furthermore, I didn't come across any words or markings on the car when disassembling to suggest the Forest Service. The only images online I can find of Forest Rovers are of Series 1s from the 1950s, so people with a better knowledge on this front would be greatly appreciated. Once we had it in our driveway, a problem arose. Members of my family were not okay with me having this car, so I had 3 days to quote-unquote make this wreck disappear. And I sure wasn't getting rid of it. So, in 3 days with the help of my dad, we fully broke down the car. So let's give a quick overview of how it looked before showing the breakdown. The state of the chassis and bulkhead were of no concern to me when buying, as I already knew I would be fully taking apart the car. But when I climbed under the car the night we got home, it was immediately clear the chassis was beyond repair. Multiple fish plates were welded in the front, and every single outrigger had terminal rot where it extended off the chassis. The chassis where the transmission mounts had fully rotten away, and the bulkhead was also gone. The Kodiak heater was rotted, the 2 fuel tanks were destroyed, and the seats were missing. All pedals were locked in place, however the steering wheel did turn, and the transmission shifted. Considering the state of the vehicle, I'll consider these some wins, and other than the seats and cushions, everything was still all there, even if lots of it was too far gone. So now, let's take it all apart. As you could expect, every single bolt was seized, so lots of WD-40, vice grips, and cutting was required. People also say you need a Whitworth set to work on Rovers, but I found in my specific case of disassembly that a mix of metric and imperial sockets worked completely fine for every bolt I came across. We then moved on to taking off the foot plates and seat box, before moving on to the rear tub, which was much heavier than we expected it to be. Once all the outer body was off, I undid the PTO winch shaft and then had to cut the winch off the frame, as it had been welded on. Lots of hammering with a cold chisel to break the final welds, which I imagine our neighbors really appreciated. We then undid the bell housing bolts and pulled the engine, which I found was really annoying as there was no lift point, so we had to wrap it up with straps. Moving on, we pulled the transmission, which we left connected to the drive shafts as a whole unit. A little wiggling to pull it out as one piece, but all in all it went pretty quick. Now when it came to the leaf spring bolts, they were pretty hit and miss in terms of being seized, so some had to be cut off. We ended up dropping one side of the leaves and rolling the axles out from under the chassis, which we stood up on some stands. My father then broke the lug nuts on the axles to remove the wheels while I cut the chassis into thirds to make moving easier. We then stuffed the engine and transmission into a basement cabinet and packed the rest of the body and axles under our deck. The chassis and bulkhead were taken for scrap after I hammered out the steering idler. And this video during taking out the idler gives a really good view of how bad the rot actually was. We then sweeped and hosed down our driveway, and it was as if the car had never been there. Now this will be a long restoration, and I do have another project that takes priority, but I will continue to post update videos on this project as I go through and refurbish every part of this vehicle to bring it back to life. If you wouldn't mind leaving your thoughts and following along, I would really appreciate it.